Do you take compounded semaglutide or compounded tirzepatide and have questions about the rules about compounding or the patent? If you do, this is for you. So I found this really great statement from the Alliance for Pharmacy Compounding. It goes by and it tells us a lot of the questions people have about compounding semaglutide and tirzepatide. So we'll go over it part by part. The first part is why compounding. Compounding plays an essential role in the American healthcare system. So many medications are compounded. They really are not knockoffs. They just are compounded because a prescriber wanted it compounded in a certain way. Okay, this is page 2. It goes over how 1 to 3% of all medications in the United States are compounded medications. In addition, federal law prohibits compounding of a medication that is essentially a copy, but that can change during times of shortages. So right now, Wegovy and Ozempic are in a shortage. Remember, FDA guidance states that if a drug listed as currently in shortage, that's exact language, it may be compounded. The third page, this is my favorite page. What about the patent? Okay, we understand that Novo Nordisk, the manufacturer of Wegovy and Ozempic, asserts its patent. Basically, though, the FDA doesn't have to do with patents. Some argue that if Congress or FDA had intended there to be an exception on a patented drug, the guidance would have stated that. While we aren't qualified to offer a legal opinion on the matter, we do note that such an exception for patented drugs would contradict the very reason the law allows compounding of FDA-approved drugs in shortage in the first place, to assure patients can continue the success they needed, access needed and often essential medications, even when the manufacturer cannot maintain its supply chain. So that would be a slippery slope to say that only medications that are not patented can be compounded. How are the compounders sourcing semaglutide-based API if Novo holds a patent on it? This is so important because we've been asked this for a long time. Assertions in the news stories that the only legitimate semaglutide API, which is active pharmaceutical ingredient, must be obtained directly from Novo Nordisk are flatly incorrect. They can exercise their control over their manufacturers, but they do not have all manufacturers locked down. And according to this article, they also go into different wellness spas being sued, and it basically has to do with them referring to the name. So a lot of trademark infringement going on. Go ahead, you can pause this to read it. I'll also post it in the comments. This is one of my most favorite parts. To suggest that compounding pharmacies are creating unauthorized drugs and therefore should be prescribed from doing so has implications well beyond semaglutide. Sorry, prohibited. I read that wrong. I think it's spelled wrong too. If the state courts grant an injunction or otherwise rule in Novo's favor in the cases against compounding pharmacies, every single drug on the market that has never been approved by the FDA, and there's lots of them, may be subject to a ban for patients in those states that they're suing. We'll go over the 4th page. How can patients know that they're getting compounded, what they're getting from compounded pharmacies is in fact semaglutide? Basically, they say that you usually don't ever walk into a legitimate pharmacy and ask, are you giving me the right lisinopril? So these pharmacies that are licensed in the United States and these compounding pharmacies are legitimate. They have to get them from legitimate sources. They're overseen by the FDA. Of course, if you have any questions about them, you can always ask the provider that that you're getting the medications from, but you can also look up the pharmacy and make sure that they're a licensed pharmacy. Under federal law, compounding pharmacies must purchase API, which is active pharmaceutical ingredient, manufactured by facilities that are FDA registered. That API comes with a certificate of analysis documenting the substance is what it says it is, as well as the exact potency and purity of the drugs. What about the sketchy websites dispensing what they say is semaglutide directly to consumers? Those aren't pharmacies at all and shouldn't be conflated with compounding pharmacies. If your doctor didn't write you a prescription for compounded semaglutide and send it to a legitimate identifiable pharmacy, beware of the seller of that substance. This part goes over using semaglutide sodium. Compounding pharmacies are not allowed to do that. It has to be just the semaglutide base. But you can always ask your provider or your pharmacy that you're getting it from to make sure. But that is prohibited. They are not supposed to use the semaglutide sodium. And you can pause it to read it. I'll also try to post it in the comments. This is their last tip for consumers. Do not buy any substance purported to be semaglutide from an online entity if you do not have a legitimate prescription from it from a licensed prescriber and you cannot verify the seller is a licensed U.S. pharmacy. You can always ask the prescriber who the compounding pharmacy is and where they're located and make sure that they're licensed to dispense in your state. I hope that this kind of clears up some confusion. I know that there's been a lot of confusion with compounded semaglutide and tirzepatide, but these compounding pharmacies are providing a much needed service for a lot of patients and helping patients who can't get it otherwise from the manufacturer. If you have any questions, please comment below. I'd like to hear and offer up any support.